What exactly is cycle syncing and seed cycling? You might have heard those buzzwords across different articles and blogs over the last few years in relation to reducing PMS symptoms, aligning our workflow with the rhythms of our cycle for better hormone balance, and a lot more. What's up, y'all? It's Alina, and in this video, we'll be diving into just that. It'll be a crash course into all things cycle syncing, seed cycling, what exactly they are, who can benefit from them most, and then we'll dive into all 4 phases within an average cycle, along with ways to cycle sync in relation to our nutrition, our exercise, our productivity, and a lot more. And finally, before we dive in, I find it very important to remind y'all that though I am a holistic nutritionist, I am not your holistic nutritionist. So it will be super important to consult your personal doctor, practitioner, or nutritionist before implementing any of the things covered in this video. And I will be referencing both the book and articles that I utilized to do all of this research. What is cycle syncing? Have you ever been super energized, found it more easy to focus one week, and then the next week you feel super sluggish and tired? We can often hyper-focus on the menstrual phase of our general 28-day cycle, but what's really interesting is that there are 3 other phases, and the menstrual phase only makes up 1/4. Our hormones actually strongly impact our mental state, appetite, weight gain, weight loss, our thought processes, and even our confidence. For example, a recent study done by the journal Archives of Gynecology and Obstetrics on hormone fluctuations over the course of a month found that women reported higher levels of well-being and self-esteem during the middle of the cycle, that being around the time of their follicular and ovulatory phase. They also reported increased feelings of anxiety, hostility, and depression around the time of their menstrual phase. But what's really empowering is that we don't necessarily need to look at cycles as just this one period that we dread and the rest is normal. More so, we can look at it as a way of empowerment in utilizing the benefits of our hormones during different phases and how they can actually help us when it comes to workflow, confidence, putting ourselves out there, and so much more. This is where the concept of seed cycling comes into play. So the phrase seed cycling was coined and trademarked by Alyssa Vitti, a functional nutritionist and the author of the book In the Flow. Now, I will be referencing this book a lot in this video, and I've learned so much from her deep research. So cycle syncing is when you adapt your diet, exercise routine, social calendar, and even important work engagements to the different phases of your monthly cycle. An example of this is seed cycling, which describes the practice of eating specific seeds during different phases of our cycle to help with hormone balance. Though cycle syncing is trending now and is considered a newer practice with more emerging research to support it, seed cycling is a practice that has dated back centuries old to Ayurvedic medicine, which is a traditional healing modality originating in India. Seed cycling utilizes the nutritional benefits of specific seeds that help with things like estrogen production, progesterone production, liver support, and much more. I'll dive deeper into the specific seeds that can be utilized during specific phases and why when we cover each phase later in the video. While most people can benefit from cycle syncing, there are specific groups of people who can benefit from it most. This includes people with cycles who feel overly fatigued, have PMS symptoms, experience PCOS, experience weight fluctuations, or are just trying to conceive. And for menopausal and postmenopausal people who don't experience consistent menstrual phases, it is often suggested to align your cycle syncing with the moon phases. So essentially starting a new cycle, the follicular phase, at a new moon. All right, let's jump into all 4 phases of the cycle, what's going on hormonally, and how we can sync with it in terms of nutrition, exercise, and productivity. Think of the follicular phase as the spring season. It's a phase that occurs immediately after a bleed or the menstrual phase, where we see steady growth of estrogen levels, which initiates the building of the uterine lining. On a behavioral level, we often experience heightened energy. This is why it's considered the spring season, following the winter when we were kind of focused more on rest, that being the menstrual phase. And now we're feeling a lot more energized. Our body isn't working as hard as it was during the menstrual phase, and we feel ready to kind of get to work. More specifically, thanks to the rise in estrogen, we experience an easier time when it comes to focus and sustained energy. As mentioned before, since we're seeing estrogen levels rising during this phase, it can be very beneficial to include more foods that have phytoestrogens in them. Phytoestrogens are plant-based compounds that mimic the body's estrogen hormone. And by eating them, we can aid the body in raising our estrogen and maintaining hormone balance. Some of these foods include fermented foods like kimchi and sauerkraut, fresh veggies like string beans, sprouted beans, zucchini and carrots, lean protein like chicken, trout, and tempeh. And in terms of seed cycling, eating seeds like flax and pumpkin seeds can be very beneficial with maintaining estrogen balance. It's also important to remember that the foods that we eat during one phase really set the stage for the following phase as we're building up the nutrients we need. So the foods that we're consuming during the follicular phase will really lend themselves to having a more balanced ovulatory phase, which is following it. During this phase, hormones are still low, including testosterone, which is often what can give us the stamina and energy we need for more high-intensity workouts. So during this phase, doing things that are more steady, like hiking, low-intensity exercises, and more flow-based yoga can be the best practice right now. So thanks to the steadily rising estrogen levels, as mentioned before, we experience a great boost in our cognitive abilities. This includes our brain's working memory and ability to handle complex tasks being way more efficient. So now is a great time to take on more complex tasks, including things like planning, doing work that requires deeper focus, starting new projects, and even starting a new business. What I find so interesting is that this is our spring season. And just like we see in the spring where new life is springing up, it's also Aries season, and it's all about initiating the intentions that we might have set in the winter, being in action, being out and about. So too do we see during the follicular phase, hormonally, we are supported to have more energy and to actually implement intentions that we might have been setting during the more restful and reflective phase of the menstruation time. Next, I have to mention our video sponsor, which is Auralign. And we essentially sell different types of metaphysical and astrology planners. So if you're somebody who is interested in aligning your schedule with the moon phases and seasons, learning more about living in alignment with them, with different sections on seasonal foods, dedicated full and new moon ritual pages to journal and reflect in alignment, then definitely check out the Auralign planner. We're having really cool sales at the time of this recording. During this time, we see a spike in estrogen, luteinizing hormone, and testosterone, all stimulating the release of an egg to sit on the uterine lining waiting to be fertilized. This is the phase where many people focus on fertility, where we usually experience peak fertility. It is from these spiked hormones that we often feel more energized, social, and communicative. We can think of this phase as our summer season, as the body is getting hotter and we are feeling more ripe to socialize and more confident to put ourselves out there. And it's no joke, funny enough, we actually see physiologically our internal body temperature increasing during the ovulatory phase. Nutritionally, focusing on foods that help to lower estrogen levels are very beneficial at this time, as during the ovulatory phase, we see a massive spike in estrogen that can often lead to potential estrogen dominance, which has symptoms that include acne, weight gain, and more intensifies PMS symptoms. Obviously, this is not for everyone. There are some cycles, for example, with me where I feel more confident, more out there, and that's it. And then there are other cycles where I feel totally fine, but that higher level of estrogen actually intensifies the following phases in my cycle. This is why incorporating foods like cruciferous vegetables, which have plant-based compounds within them that help to support the liver to metabolize excess estrogen can be very beneficial. Some vegetables that fall under the cruciferous umbrella include Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kale, collard greens, and cauliflower. Again, going back to looking at these phases as different seasons, even in traditional Chinese medicine, they describe the ovulatory phase to be a hot phase. And so they recommend incorporating more raw fruits and vegetables for their cooling properties. These include things like bell peppers, spinach, tomatoes, and berries. Many of these fruits and vegetables also contain a powerful antioxidant called glutathione, which helps support the liver to, again, metabolize excess estrogen. In terms of seed cycling, incorporating seeds like flax and pumpkin once again help with reducing the production of estrogen by blocking the hormone. They also contain higher levels of zinc, which is an important building block of progesterone, which will help set the stage for the following phases of the cycle to help them go more smoothly. Since we're seeing peak levels of testosterone and estrogen at this time, it's really giving us a lot more energy to do more exercises like high intensity interval training, cycling, and cardio activities. If you're interested in starting or getting back into any type of exercise that requires a little bit more energy, starting that off during the ovulatory phase can be a great first impression as our energy levels are higher. Peaking estrogen levels during this time really stimulate synaptic connections in the mind, and this boosts our mental sharpness, communication, and creativity. So now is really a powerful time to put ourselves out there and have those important conversations if we feel like doing so. This can look like scheduling that talk with your boss, scheduling interviews for a new job, and finally asking for that raise. If you're someone who might need to give a speech or put yourself out there in any way, during the ovulatory phase can be an optimal time for doing so. For me, I'm actually bulk recording a lot of my videos during my ovulatory phase, which is right now at the time of this recording. I find it much easier to get into the flow of communicating and having more stamina of doing so right now compared to maybe my luteal or menstrual phase, which we'll get into next. Think of this as your autumn. During this time, we see rising progesterone and lowering testosterone and estrogen, resulting in lower energy. This is partially because the body is preparing for the menstrual phase, which will occur in the next few days. It is also around the tail end of the luteal phase that we experience our biggest drop in hormones, which can often result in PMS symptoms like depression, anxiety, and lower energy. Nutritionally, now is an optimal time for incorporating more slow-burning carbohydrates like sweet potatoes and brown rice, along with foods that are higher in B vitamins like dark leafy greens, including collard greens and watercress. During this phase, we can often experience peaks in cravings, and that is where the B vitamins come into play as they help with our body's production of progesterone, which helps to stabilize our blood sugar. These higher, more complex fiber foods also help with blood sugar regulation, along with helping to support the liver, which is still working hard to metabolize excess estrogen. In terms of seed cycling, incorporating a tablespoon of sesame or sunflower seeds at this time can help with preventing estrogen dominance, which can result in increased PMS symptoms. This is partially because they offer great doses of both selenium and vitamin E, which are two essential hormone balancing nutrients. Since our bodies are focused on preparing for another period and we're experiencing the lowest amount of hormones, we can definitely feel a lot more lower energetically. So incorporating exercises that are less focused on cardio and more on strength training, like Pilates, weightlifting, and more intense versions of yoga can be the most beneficial at this time. These are exercises where you're still challenging your body, but you're able to go at your own pace, which is more aligned with the lower energy that we might be experiencing at this time. The ratio of estrogen to progesterone at this time can actually give us an increased attention to detail. So incorporating things like doing quarterly reviews, finalizing contracts, wrapping up projects, or maybe even editing them can be very beneficial at this time. We want to think of the luteal phase as our autumn phase, the time where we see in nature Farmers who are living in alignment with nature are preparing for the winter time ahead. So they're getting things in order. They are reaping what they have sown. They are harvesting before the cold sets in. And so it's interesting to see that hormonally we are being supported in terms of getting things in order, organizing things before a time of rest. We can also feel called to clean or organize our spaces, whether that's our personal home, our office space, or even digitally, getting really clear on what our workflow will look like for the next few weeks. And last but not least, let's talk our menstrual phase. During this time, we see our uterine lining begin to shed, resulting in our bleed. And this is in response to the biggest drop in estrogen and testosterone that we see at the tail end of the luteal phase. Our bodies are working very hard to shed this lining, resulting in some of the lowest energy levels of our entire cycle for many people. So now is a powerful time for rest and reflection. It's one of the reasons why I call this time our winter phase, where we see seasonally, most people are staying indoors. They're eating more slow-cooked, warming meals. And they're taking time to rest and reflect on the previous cycle and plan for the next one ahead. Nutritionally, avoiding or limiting the amount of fatty foods, caffeine, alcohol, and salty foods that we consume during this time can be very helpful in preventing inflammation, which is oftentimes one of the root causes of our cramping and swelling or soreness. And in terms of seed cycling, eating seeds like flax and pumpkin seeds can be very beneficial with maintaining estrogen balance. In terms of exercise, rest is key during this time. And it is through this rest that we can oftentimes feel more energized during the rest of our cycle. So doing things like steady walks in nature or through our neighborhood, and focusing on more yin or kundalini types of yoga that support stretching and good blood flow can be very beneficial during this time. So pamper yourself. Proudly go to bed early and give your body the rest that it needs. Even if it's compartmentalized in different areas of your day, if you have to have a full work day, that is better than pushing ourselves beyond our limit or trying to act like we aren't, menstruating humans that have cycles of highs and lows, just like in nature. During our menstrual phase, the communication between the right and left hemisphere of our brains are a lot stronger, and this can result in heightened intuition and evaluation abilities. This is why, just like we see seasonally with this being kind of like the winter phase, this is a great time to rest and reflect. Just like we see people staying in, thinking about the previous year, focusing more on the mind rather than the physical aspects of life. So now is a powerful time to rest and reflect on performance, efficiency, and how we have shown up over the previous cycle, quarter, season, or even year. So now is a great time to reassess goals, take frequent breaks, review different project or marketing analytics, information, statistics on performance, and review things like your planner or schedule for the new cycle ahead. And now, on a more personal note, I'm going to share with y'all how I personally track my cycle and align my schedule to sync with my cycle. And as many of y'all know, I am so deeply passionate about the concept of living in alignment with the rhythms of our body and nature, not so much the rhythms of workflow and productivity, but really understanding that just as we see in nature having its seasons, the moon having its phases, so do we internally have our own, and being able to utilize them and look beyond kind of just the more stereotypical or hyper-focused aspect of menstruation, but looking at the entire cycle and how we can actually harness and live in alignment with it for empowerment is just a really cool concept to me. And I hope that this can lend itself to help y'all better understand how you can take this information and customize it for your own lifestyle, and it doesn't need to be this crazy by the book type of situation. In fact, the book that I reference a lot in this video, called In the Flow, is a book that I pull out all the time to reference depending on my cycle, just as a little bit of a reminder. So this is a more casual phase of the video where we're just kind of chilling. I'm just your friend letting you know, hey, did you hear about seed cycling? Did you hear about cycle syncing? Let me tell you how I use it, okay? So first off, I use the app called Clue. This is the icon. You tap on it. It lets you know how many days you have until your menstrual phase. And it mainly focuses on your menstrual and ovulatory phase because those are the more, hot button important ones for a lot of people. A lot of people who are looking to conceive focus on the ovulatory phase. A lot of people who are looking to just be prepared for their cycle focus on the cycle phase. So this is the app that I use, but please comment down below if you have a better one. I believe that they have a paid version where they will let you know, hey, your luteal phase is starting today, your follicular phase is starting today, and they get a little bit more specific. But if y'all know of an app that has a free version that offers that, I would love to try it. Okay, so next, in terms of how I implement cycle thinking into my life. So far, I'm relatively new at it, but what I try to do to simplify it for myself, especially starting out, is that I section it into just two parts of my cycle. So the first part being the follicular and ovulatory phase, where I have a lot more energy usually, and there's a higher, rise in estrogen that I want to regulate through the seed cycling and foods that I eat. And then there's the second half, that being the luteal and then menstrual phase, where I usually have lower energy, lower hormonal levels, where I'm looking to support my estrogen and testosterone growing to have more balanced energy and hormone flow. So during the first half, that is usually the time where I incorporate more lighter foods. So that's fresh salads and smoothies. If I am feeling called to maybe focus on weight loss, or I am wanting to try intermittent fasting, that's the time that I do it, because I know that hormonally I am more supported to do so. Whereas during the second phase, our body is really preparing to be hard at work, and we're more likely hormonally to respond to a deficit in calories by holding on to our weight. And if I do incorporate seeds for seed cycling, I just toss them in my smoothies to make it easier. In terms of productivity and socialization, during the first half, that being again the follicular and ovulatory phase, I usually write out most of my videos because I have more focus. I usually record most of my videos, and I try to schedule more social gatherings. This is such an interesting hack. This is a part that I really love about it, in that I've noticed that when I go out and socialize, like literally I went out and socialized yesterday, and I just felt way more confident than just a few weeks ago when I was going through my luteal phase. So it's kind of interesting to see that difference. And the best I can describe it is that I felt more inspired. I felt more energized to kind of set intentions and plan things out for the coming cycle ahead. And then during the second half of my cycle, that being the luteal and menstrual phase, that's when I try to focus more on the soups, the slower cooked meals, like the chilies, the cooked meats. And I try to focus more on nutrient density through these slower cooked warming meals, more so than trying to lose weight. Because this is really the time when my body is needing more support in terms of B vitamins through the slow cooked leafy greens, in terms of building my blood, in terms of, things like that. So that's really the time dietarily that I do that. Now, in terms of productivity, for me in my luteal and menstrual phase, the way that this shows up in my life, in my workflow, is like I mentioned before, I try to batch record videos during my ovulatory phase where I'm feeling more communicative, confident, and energized. And then it's during my luteal phase that I usually edit my videos. This is that time where my brain is more primed to be able to notice smaller details. And though I feel lower energy, because I'm just simply sitting behind a computer, I'm able to really narrow in my focus on a stream of just editing. All right, y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up the video here, but if you made it to the end, please comment 3 lightning strike emojis. I was gonna say the little blood drop, but you know what? There's so much more to our cycle, and I feel like this is all about taking the power back, focusing on the empowering aspects of our cycle, and also the power of rest during the menstrual phase, So anyway, if you do comment that, or just comment your perspective of this, things that you might have tried with seed cycling, if you have read the book In the Flow, which I highly recommend. Either way, whatever you decide to comment, I am so appreciative of it, because when you engage with my work, you are telling the YouTube algorithm, the powers that be, that you enjoy content like this, and it is deeply appreciated. And last but not least, if you are interested in aligning your schedule with the moon phases, seasons, and cosmos, be sure to check out the Auralign Astrology Planner. I'll have links for it on the screen here and in the description box below. But with all of that said, I will leave you with my favorite quote, and that is, be gentle with yourself, because life is about the journey, not the destination. All right. Bye, friends.